All right, all right, all right. I love this. We get to talk everything murder, serial killers, and rape stories. I mean,
yes. Oh no,
you don't talk about no rape stories. She's like,
they might have
really
raped them after they or killed them, or
maybe
before
we
they
never
killed them.
know because they're already dead and we never get to able to hear their point of view. But we got Brianna Miera. You got your famous podcast called Murder Dictionary, and you have another one called Crime Scream. And, I mean, you're a busy cat. And you got Rockumentary. So tell the listeners, who are you?
I'm Brianna, and I don't sleep because I have so many podcasts.
I mean, that's insane.
That was actually one of my questions. Do you ever sleep?
No.
Like literally, how do you juggle a schedule like that? Is it all kind of pre-planned when you do recording sessions, or do you kind of like milk it out all in one day?
It's kind of like living paycheck to paycheck, to be perfectly honest.
Wow. And I mean,
it's like I'm just writing just to record that weekend because it is a lot. It's just,
No, it's really intense, and I can only imagine, and like, I can't imagine the ad revenue spend being like the number one source that, I mean, would that be something that you would consider? Because, I mean, Marissa and I, we always kind of joke, like, when I think about a podcast, it's like a bunch of white people in a room together, you know, and everybody's so glib and they think they can do it. And, like, how much preparation does it take for something like, I mean, a murder case, I can only imagine takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of...
Yeah, because, I mean, I think you're right. People can sit around in a room and talk, and that's great. But when you have this responsibility of talking about a real-life case where someone lost their life, where there's family members that are survivors, you need some prep time. There's hours and hours of research, hours and hours of writing. So there's a lot of responsibility there. But people think they can just like, oh, I've got a microphone, or I could just record it on my iPhone. I'm like, you're not that interested.
And I think what I like as a listener, I'm a fanatic with like serial killers and stuff. I wanted to be a criminal profiler back in the day. But what I loved about yours is I subscribe to Oxygen because I do read all these like crazy murders.
Don't we all?
Yeah, they're so good. And what I loved about your podcast on listening to it is you actually went into the background of the person, like the one, I didn't hear this Thursdays, but last Thursday you had about the kid and the kind of household they grew up in. And that's that nature, nurture, where really is this killer being developed? So where do you get your facts for this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can only imagine like it would be wrong on yourself to say something that might be harmful even towards the family, even if someone's deceased.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I got into it, that was my point, is looking at the psychology and the background. A lot of shows focus on just the event, but there's so much more there. There's an entire life of every person involved, the family members, the victim, the perpetrator. There's so much information.
Or even the story that even becomes the situation that becomes such an awful scene. I can only imagine. And like, I just have to ask you this. I know this is super random, but like, when I think about somebody that's doing murder podcasts, do you have like these revenge fantasies? I mean, I can only imagine you get so pissed off when you hear about some of the most god-awful things, and then you're just like, I would love to just give that guy a hard nookie.
Right? Like, I understand. I totally get it. When we're talking about these things, I put myself in the place of the survivor, of the person that's, you know, the family member or the loved one. And I'm like, I know I would seek the most severe justice. Would I be able to take it out on my own and do the whole revenge thing?
Right.
I've never even been in a physical fight. Let's be real.
No, I mean, I haven't either, but I can only imagine if I had myself a child and something that was so gruesome. I mean, I even saw yesterday on Twitter, they had this whole viral video of a police cam showing about how they rescued an 8-year-old child that got stolen from their mother, and there was blood all over the bed. The kid was unclothed, and then they're pulling him out, and she's like, is everything okay? And she's like, I'm okay. She's so young, she doesn't even know how to handle those situations. And I kind of get really cringy inside. And I definitely have a revengefulness in it. I mean, you know, as much as you got to let the law enforcement do their job, it's a very, I mean, there's just so much stuff that happens in this country and all over the world that, I mean, how would you best recommend the listeners to handle a situation like this? Because I can only imagine learning case by case, what's the best way to handle a situation if it ever happened to you?
I mean, I think when you have this background in true crime, we have these examples of people that go through all the proper channels, that are really out there, like starting a podcast about a particular case, or going to the news media and really drumming up interest so that it doesn't slip between the cracks, so that someone doesn't get like 5 years. Like
Yeah.
that person might just get 5 years.
I mean, you
For,
see,
for a sex offender thing, it's so
or even
little.
like 18 months. I mean, it's like
So
why
small.
did you get into this? Like,
Yes.
what was that moment day drinking a latte? You know what I mean? Be like, I'm gonna do serial
yeah,
murder.
are you
Right.
like a Law and Order fan? Is that kind of how
Always
it got going?
been
So tell
an
me, what was it?
SVU fan for
Okay.
sure. That's like everyone's gateway drug, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
right,
just
right.
Like, yeah, Benson Stabler, you know, like, right. So there is that. But I think that we kind of grew up in this era of huge crime cases that all of a
Yeah.
sudden were in the news. We're in the era where there's a 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah.
We've got these huge cases. So I think this generation is kind of perfect for true crime. That's why there's such a boom, is because there's so much more information now.
Right.
There's so many more cases that we
yeah.
know every detail of,
Yeah.
where we didn't necessarily have that before. Obsession with true crime is not new. Definitely not.
Yeah,
It's been throughout time.
Well, I wanted
But
to read
what
you
made
this.
you decide? I'm going to stick with it. What
Yes.
made you
Yeah, that's
decide
true.
that day that this is what you wanted to do? Like, what was it?
What was that thing?
Yeah.
I was just talking about true crime with my coworkers constantly. And then they would give me cases, and they were like, oh, well, have you heard of this one? And you heard of that one? Then I deep dive in that, and I'm like, well, I'm already listening to podcasts and audiobooks. What if I just made one? And beyond that, I feel like podcasting is a space and true crime is a space where women can take the narrative back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where like men have always been the perpetrators of the crime.
Or
for the
even on
most part.
SVU, it always seems like it's a big like allegiance of men that are just like.
Exactly. It's the law enforcement, it's the journalists that are reporting it, and then where are women? Women are only been the
Right.
victims historically.
I wanted to read you this because I thought this was pretty interesting. This is a Canadian reporter from the New Yorker, Malcolm Gladwell, and he has this theory on crime shows, and he breaks. There's like 4 different terms. There's a Western film, there's Eastern films, and there's Northern films, and then there's Southern films. So with
Okay.
Western films, it's always conceptually a world in which there's no law and order, and a white knight shows up to impose the law and order. Then there's like Eastern films, which are kind of like your House of Cards or Billions or, those kind of things where there is law and order and an institution of justice, but it has been subverted from within.
Dun, dun,
And then there's the
corruption.
Northern films where I would say this is more of a law and order SVU, where law and order exists and is morally a righteous system, and it's a reliable and it's accurately going to produce the correct result at the end of every episode, where a Southern film is the entire apparatus is corrupt, and where the reformer is not the insider but an outsider because the system is rotten and must be reformed from without. So if you heard these 4, how would you compare your podcast?
Oh my goodness. Well, there's examples. The reason that I love podcasting and the format that we do is because we can do all of those. We can root for different people within, we can root for the law enforcement because we'll follow their journey closely. We can root for the family members because they're trying to get the media involved.
Or even
there's-
the murderer, right? Like How to Make a Murderer. Like for so
Well,
long, so many people thought that he
he's-
didn't do it.
Exactly. Or Adnan Syed, or
Yeah.
like you were talking about the Killer Kids episodes we did. There is a little bit of an element of knowing these are abused kids that end
Yeah.
up doing these things. So you're kind of rooting for them to get healthy and well and improve their own mental health.
Right, and with me, when I think about murder podcasts, I feel like it's like the best placement for any of these kind of conversations, just because you get to visualize it in your head, and you don't have to have somebody kind of form, I guess, your opinion or how you think the case will go. And
Right.
sometimes, and so when you're thinking of, so you kind of already explained it yourself. Like, I mean, sometimes you guys will be able to answer those clues at the end because maybe it's a really long case, and sometimes you dive into some that are just, you will never know the answers. We only have a few kind of detail. I mean, it's always like that same Hitler conspiracy. Did he kill himself or did he go to
Right.
South America? But with me, it's like, why does everybody love murder, rape, and serial killers?
Oh man, that's so heavy because we do. It's just
We really do.
everyone does. They're obsessed. And I think it's just my inclination is to say it's the same reason we like roller coasters
Yeah.
and
The
haunted hay
thrill.
rides and like horror movies, and we just kind of like to be afraid.
Well, for
Well,
like
and
the,
I also
yeah.
feel that as a woman, and this might be just because of me, that nurturing aspect, like here's my broken little pretty thing, and I'm going to try and make it better. That's why so many women write to men in prison who have murdered, raped, beaten, killed. And then when they get out, like, oh, he beat me. I didn't know he would do that. And I'm like,
surprise,
track record.
Right. And
but, you know, they have that. They have
but
the
you have a
nurture.
great point, because I was pretty amazed. I thought this was pretty wild. I guess, for example, the Wine and Crime podcast gets up to 500,000 downloads per month. And they say from their analytics, their audience is 85% women.
And that's pretty true across the board.
That's
Any
insane.
big podcast, it's yeah.
Do you think it's because we're always
predominantly
playing
women.
video games and we always think like we know how to play some combat?
Right, like if I just
Us
do
men,
this
we're like, we know how to fight.
simulation enough, then I will know how to do it. Yeah, oh, totally. There's an element of personal safety. Like you're preparing for it. Like, you know, if I was in such and such situation, then I can get my way out of it, right?
Right.
People think that that's going to help them get through. And I think my personal approach is that beyond that, it's also lessons for us to look out for each other.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stories that are coming out, even within these true crime communities and whatnot, where it's like, well, I saw this guy that was kind of creepy, so I intervened. I pretended she was my friend
Yeah.
and went up and hugged
Have
her.
you ever dated
my
someone
gosh.
where you thought they actually might be some type of a serial killer? No?
No. I know too many red flags for that.
Okay, what's a red flag? Give our listeners red flags.
Yes,
this is
please.
who you don't date, please. 'Cause I
Yes.
mess up sometimes.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's kind of scary. I mean, nowadays, I mean, dating's not even a real thing, like face to face. It's always
Yeah.
like through Tinder, Hinge, or Bumble, or whatever
So,
the heck,
yeah.
or like
give us
eHarmony.com.
the red flags.
Honestly, it's like if you feel uncomfortable, go with your gut. That's the biggest red flag, is just like
Yeah.
people that say kind of off-color things
Mm-hmm.
and they think that it's acceptable, and you're like, this is not okay. But then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, LOL. Don't LOL that. Don't let it slide. Just
Yeah.
be like, hey, that's weird. I'm not going to message you again.
Right, like we all know the signs, and it's just like, I mean, we already see it on Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah.
Like when you see something creepy, or we've all seen our favorite movies where like, I'm pretty sure they've done the same thing to me. I don't want to be in those same shoes. But I want to remind all the listeners out there, we have Brianna Miera, and you're in the studio, and she does Murder Dictionary, Crime Scream, and she has a brand new podcast that's about to be dropping real soon, Rockumentary. And it's not about rocks, Eric Frias, okay? It's not about rocks. It's more than boulders, okay? It's rock and roll, baby. And I wanted to remind everybody out there that if you've been streaming with us live out there, we haven't been streaming.
No, we're going to keep it going for the whole segment.
Hey, let's go,
That's
rock
Right,
and
that's
roll.
how good
Keep it
you
rolling.
are.
Hey, we love it, baby. So hey, I'm teasing y'all. So stick around with us, and if you want to check us out through audio and you got to go to work, click the on air button at thechriscollinsshow.com. Hi.
Hey.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
So we have Brianna Miera. She is the famous hit true crime Murder Dictionary, Crime Screen, and you got a brand new podcast called Rockumentary. And Eric, rock and roll's not dead, all right? And I'm just gonna get straight to it because let's talk about some rock and roll. Why did you have the aspirations to kind of switch gears with your genre and talk about some classic rock and roll?
To be honest, it's the same reason as true crime. It's like this kind of feminist thing in me where it's like mostly it's men talking about rock. Let's
Well,
be honest.
no, it's
just
true.
like dominated.
Yeah.
So like it feels very like a brave revolutionary thing to be like, yeah, I'm a woman and I'm going to tell you all about rock and roll.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
Metal Jackie.
Yeah,
on,
Full Metal Jackie.
Yeah, she's fabulous.
Yeah.
But
Oh
we
my
also
God, I
even
love
talked
her.
about it on the show, and I mean, we were even saying it with Two Girls, One Mic, and they were in such disbelief, but it's true. 95% of the rock and roll bands out there are male. I mean,
yeah.
think about it. I mean, there's only a very few. I mean, yeah, you got your classic female lead singer like Evanescence or Tonight Alive, but, Fleetwood Mac, but it's full of men in the background.
right.
And I'm a firm believer, give that little girl, along with that Barbie, whatever, a guitar.
Absolutely.
Give the instruments, because it is proven that it's usually the boy kids get the drums.
Exactly.
Get the, versus
and the
girl.
drugs. No, I'm just kidding.
All of the above.
Only
Oh,
the
yeah.
rocks. Only the
But like,
rocks.
so with your show Rockumentary, how is that show going to be geared for the listeners? Like, what can we expect from that show?
So it may sound a little boring, but I really want it to be like short audiobooks. I want it to be
Okay.
like 3-hour stories of like deep dives. If you've listened to Murder Dictionary, I'm all about research, like
Yeah.
super research. So I want it to be something that's not long enough to be like, oh, I'm 13 hours in and I'm a little bored, but, you know, longer than just like, here's 30 minutes. Because so much happens in a band's whole career, you know?
It's true.
Even when they're just starting out, like there's just so much that goes into it. And I think there's so much to talk about. They have such interesting lives, and it's
So are you going to go into that deep research about like their psychology of their stuff? Like
Yeah,
how they
like-
make music?
Yeah, of course. Like
Yeah.
so and so
I dig
has,
that.
you know, issues with their parents, and like
Yeah.
usually it's that.
Are you also going to do the love triangles? Because I noticed that rock and roll
Love
stars,
triangles.
rock and roll stars screw each other.
Well, you were just talking about Fleetwood Mac, and that's
Yeah.
one of the first ones that I've written, and it is.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, it's way more than a triangle. If you guys
Oh,
are familiar,
yeah, I do
I mean,
know
it's
what
like
that
every
is. Oh,
there's
yeah.
some sort of diagram you got to make.
Because all I know is it's like you got the classic Richard Pryor and oh my gosh, the guy from The Godfather. Why am I blanking out? Oh my gosh. No, not Al Pacino. Why am I blanking out? You know,
I don't.
the mafia.
uh,
Why am I blanking? Oh my
Habanero?
gosh, it don't matter. We're talking about rock and roll. Oh, my dad's
Like, how
gonna
do we
be.
go
My
to a
dad's probably
movie?
screaming at me and going, "You don't know The Godfather!" Like literally right now. I'm sorry, Kevin. I'm sorry.
Okay, boomer.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, he's literally on the other side. He's like, okay, millennial. I'm like, you ruined everything. But, you know, even going with even the crime shows and talking about that, I mean, I know that you haven't seen The Joker just yet, but I know that we can
No.
even talk about it because I wanted to throw a curveball question. Have you seen it yet, Marissa?
No.
But
I know. I failed.
yeah.
I failed.
But
I'm
obviously-
seeing
We're going
Frozen.
right after
I know,
this.
we're gonna go.
But there's some kind of sympathy that's happening with so many young millennials where like when I saw the film, I won't spoil it, but I literally was like, how could you be on the side of a crazy man like that? And like I'm sure with so many stories, have you felt like you understand why someone does the motive but handle it the wrong situation? Like let's say like a Myles Garrett situation with the Cleveland Browns smacking Mason Rudolph over the head.
Totally lost me there.
No,
Nope.
like you know, like there's because he
Was
had,
that a sports thing?
that was it. Well, like,
Last week,
he used it.
a
Yeah.
guy used his helmet to hit another guy over the head, and it was a big.
And he had no
foo-foo-foo.
helmet on. It was like the last 8 seconds
And it
of the
was
game.
wrong.
And you're thinking,
I blacked out for the last 60 seconds. I don't know what happened.
okay, well let me say it like
Back
this.
to
No,
Joker.
but I understand that people are obsessed with like relating to the villains. There's something
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
where people want to like connect, and
Or you want to sympathize with them, even though they'd
Yeah.
already done this crazy heinous crime. Or it's like I think about this rock and roller as they lay dying, you know. And the lead singer, he literally hired a hitman to try to kill his wife, and he only went to jail for 3 years.
I can relate
and-
to that. No, I was kidding.
Then, yeah, and no, but then comes back,
Sorry, husband.
and they are number one on the heavy metal charts
Right.
all during the summer, and I don't understand why that's such a huge craze, and why do you think it's because people just be naive and they think about the music and less about the actual
Yeah.
person's personal life?
I think there's a little bit of like we just forgive whatever. We are holding people more accountable nowadays, but we do have a lot more forgiveness than we should. But
Yeah.
also, I think my theory is people have a lot more anger than we really think they do.
Yes.
Do you think it's 'cause
People
of the
think
internet?
there's a lot of injustice. Yeah, there's a lot more information out there of what's going wrong in the world.
Yeah.
People feel
And
wronged.
people don't know how to channel it. I mean, back in the day
Yeah.
when we were hunter-gatherers, I mean, you are mad, I stabbed a saber-toothed tiger, we kept it rolling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
it
go
was
about our
that
day.
simple. I mean, if
That
he's
was
invading
easy.
my space,
Yeah.
I take him out.
Right.
But it's so true, and I mean, I gotta ask you this: even though do you think rock and roll's dead? Because I
No.
sure don't. I think it's still like one of the biggest. I think it's more global than it is with hip hop right now. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, especially in political climates and stuff, rock and roll always prevails. Where it, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right,
you
it's,
know,
it's
like,
never about booty, drugs, or stripper rap. It's
No.
always about some heartfelt stuff.
Revolution.
But then again, you're gonna have some of that arrogant metal, like some Attila. And, sometimes that's good for the soul. Sometimes you gotta loosen up. But hey, I want to remind everybody out there that you're listening to the Chris Collins Show, and we got Brianna Miera, and you got your murder dictionary, crime screen, and the brand new podcast is gonna be dropping soon, Rockumentary. And where can they find you on social media?
everywhere is Murder Dictionary and also Crime Screen and Rockumentary. Just
Hey.
search for us, you'll find us.
That's
Trust.
that simple and
Very
stick ar-
easy.
And for those of you who have been streaming with us this morning, please continue to listen to our show by going to thechriscollinsshow.com and click the on-air button.
It's that simple. It's really rad and big.
Click it.
And if you like what you're listening to, go to thechriscollinsshow.com and become a member today.
What's good, listeners? I'm the host of The Chris Collins Show, and if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button below and check us out at thechriscollinsshow.com. Peace!